Erica and Sharon are sisters who began their grief journey in 2006 when Erica's 10-year-old son Austin drowned. Together, they participated in a grief education program, were so moved by this experience, they studied and became specialists so they could help the brokenhearted find recovery. In 2015, tragedy struck their family once again when Erica's oldest son, Donovan, was killed in a motorcycle accident. Erica and Sharon are committed to sharing their experiences of love, loss, and healing through this podcast. Now your grief specialists, Sharon and Erica.
Hi friends, welcome to Healing Starts with the Heart, the podcast.
Where it's all about you, the griever, and your broken heart. If you tuned in today, there's a huge probability that your heart could be broken. It could be from a loss, either recent or long ago, or it could be from the breakup of a romantic relationship, or the feeling that your life is just not as happy or fulfilling as you want it to be.
Yeah.
Regardless of the cause, we don't even care. We're just here to give you some insight and some light today.
Well, we care, but it's not.
We don't care.
It's not. It doesn't matter what brings you here. We're so glad you're here because we want to give you some tools to help you with your pain.
Okay, and I'm the older sister, and she just showed the total younger sister there. We care. We do care. We love you.
We absolutely do. We have a good show today, and for those of us that are watching our video, our show today is on triggers, and so I have this great t-shirt, which I think is a good example of how when you do your work and you are recovered, you don't get triggered by the things that would normally break you down. So this is my Star Wars shirt because Austin loved Star Wars. I mean, huge fan. And I could only imagine how glued he would be to the television now with Disney Plus releasing their new Star Wars spin-off series. And for me, prior to doing this work, that would have been a trigger.
Right.
It would have made me cry.
So going back to the lightsaber there,
Yeah.
I don't know if we've ever shared this, but we put a lightsaber in Austin's casket.
Yeah, no, we've never talked about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We put a lightsaber in there so he could have it with him.
Yeah, Austin loved Star Wars, the General Lee from the Dukes of Hazzard. He didn't really necessarily care for the show, but he loved the car. He loved his Nintendo GameCube. That's all.
We loved the GameCube.
13 years ago.
We also put the GameCube
We put
in there.
This is all the things that went in his casket: his lightsaber, his General Lee, his GameCube.
Yeah.
And those were all of his favorite things. I could have packed him a lunch. I probably would have, because we just wanted him to have all of his favorites.
We put some coins and some notes in there.
Yeah.
It was really beautiful.
Yeah.
Really beautiful.
I hope you guys are looking at me and seeing I'm not crying.
Yeah.
This is not breaking me down to share this. Wearing this t-shirt when I bought it did not make me cry. It made me smile.
But let's go back to the beginning.
Yes.
It did trigger you in the beginning.
Oh my God, I was crying all the time. Truth be told.
Truth be told, it did trigger you in the beginning. Any
Yes.
little thing could trigger you.
Yes.
A photo,
Oh my gosh.
a smell.
There's just someone talking about an experience they had
Yeah.
with him
Yeah.
would make me cry because I missed him so. I still miss him so much.
Yeah. And one of the things that I thought was really great, and I talk about this, is that Uncle Lou set the tone, and he was like, we're going to talk about Austin. One of the other things he didn't want us to do was he forbid anyone from wearing black to the funeral. He's like, this
Right.
was a happy child. We're going to wear joy. We're
Yeah.
going to talk about it. But Austin also wore puka shells that summer that he died. And so just seeing the puka shells would set you off. Or
Yeah.
driving by the church.
Right. Well, this was a church where we had his funeral, where I had practically my whole life. I was raised in that church. I was married in that church. My children were baptized in that
Yeah.
church. And then I buried my son in that church.
Yeah. That's heavy.
Yeah, it is.
That's totally heavy.
It is.
So even I remember avoiding that street altogether, not even going down that street, because just the feeling of passing that church would bring up all of these feelings and emotions for me. And
Right.
it could set me off crying for the rest of the day.
Yeah, there are so many. When you have a grieving experience, there are so many triggers out there that, unfortunately, there's so many you can't even try to avoid them. You have to become a recluse and never leave your house and never turn on the TV, because there's something that's going to remind you of your loved one.
And the triggers are past and present.
Yeah.
So they're triggers from the past, and then there's also these triggers from the present. So driving by the church was absolutely an example of the past. Going by the church, even being anywhere in that vicinity, was a trigger from my past or that experience that I had, right? But a future trigger might be the new Star Wars coming out and thinking, man, it'd be so cool to enjoy that with him.
I remember when the first Transformers movie came out, and I cried through the majority of the ending because I knew how much Austin would have loved it.
Yeah.
I knew how much he would have that would have been his new thing.
Yeah.
This boy was everything, like, not so much sci-fi, but, you know, Transformers, Iron Man, Star Wars. Like, he was all about that. Like, all that was his jam. So I really, really cried because I just knew he would love it, and he never got to see it.
But the triggers can set us into a spin that we can't figure a way out of.
Correct.
So the triggers can send us into a spin, which actually sends us to our bed, or sends us to isolating, or sends us to avoiding.
To wine.
Send us to wine, not whining the sound, whining the drink.
Yes.
Yeah. Or overeating.
Yeah.
Or anger.
Yes.
One little trigger can set you into a anger episode, and you can say mean and hurtful things to someone who's sitting right next to you, and they had nothing to do with it.
I was just talking to someone yesterday, and they were sharing they lost a child, and their husband, something triggered him. They were out in a social setting, and something triggered him, and all of a sudden he became very short, very angry,
Right.
with like everyone around, and he just wanted to leave. And it came out of nowhere, so she didn't know what happened. And they got in the car, and she said it was a very long and quiet drive home. And then finally, as soon as they pulled into their driveway, he shared with her what it was, and then it all made sense. But for a minute, she kind of thought he was crazy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because that's
Yeah.
how it can. That's how it can happen, and that's how it can feel,
Right.
and that's how it can look to the people outside.
Right. And when you're triggered, sometimes you can feel it in your gut. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you can feel it in your heart. Sometimes you feel it in your head.
Yeah.
And sometimes you feel it in your eyes.
Yeah.
And sometimes what happens with that trigger is we don't want to have that release right there, the release of the tears in front of anyone, especially if we think that they think we should be over this. Mm-hmm. Or we don't have a safe place to share that trigger.
That's the thing. I think that's the part that makes it where you could address it right in the moment, but if you don't have a safe place, you stuff it, and then it unleashes eventually like a tsunami, and you're out of control because you've been stuffing it for so long.
I can absolutely 100% remember you, number one, calling me all hours of the night with triggers.
Yeah. Oh.
But also picking up the phone, and sometimes I find myself still doing this to you, and I'm like, what's wrong? Just by the tone of your voice.
Yeah.
And it could have been anything that's
Yeah.
trigger. You sometimes still have triggers to this day.
Well, every
They're
single